Welcome to Table for One. I'm the narrator, and in today's video, I'll be comparing Dune Imperium and Dune Imperium Uprising. Let's get rolling. Alright, so in today's video, I would like to do a comparison between Dune Imperium here on the left and Dune Imperium Uprising here on the right. And so this is not going to be an exhaustive comparison. I'm not going to go through every single card or anything like that, or even all the differences between the board spaces. But I'm going to sort of talk generally about both versions of the game and the most important differences as far as I found, and things that I think you might think are important, especially if you are considering trying to perhaps purchase one of these two games. And so having played them both now, I'm going to tell you, I guess, what I think is important. Because I know for a while I was interested in the Dune Imperium games, and I didn't really know where to start or what the differences were or why I might want one versus the other. So if we start at a very high level, the overall game shape and gameplay loop, the loop especially, is very, very similar. It's kind of the same game. And if you just very generally look at the two boards, they look obviously very similar. So I know this is not the official stance of the publisher, but in my mind, Dune Imperium Uprising is kind of like Dune Imperium 2nd Edition. Now that doesn't mean that Dune Imperium Uprising is inherently better. It's just going to depend on what your situation is and what it is you're looking to get out of the game. So let's start by talking about a couple of things that are the same. Of course, the boards look very similar. There are some differences if you start looking at them. But overall, the boards are very similar. The components are essentially the same. So I've got these cardboard punch-out alliance tokens here just for demonstration. You can expect these to be virtually identical. The components here are the same. So these are your Solari, your spice, and your water. These are your resources that you can spend. Those are the same between one game and the other. These are player-colored components here. So you've got your agents. These are your workers that you're sending to these various spots. You've got your troops, which are just wooden cubes. Those are going to be the same between the two games. You've got your control markers that are flags that you can put on these different spaces when you control them. You've got your combat value tracker, your scoring tracker. There's another one of these if you get a seat at the High Council. These things are going to be identical between the two games. And in either case, if you're not that into the wooden components, I know there's upgrade packs available. You can get minis for most of this stuff. So that's not where my particular interest is, so I don't have those. I can't show them to you, but I know they are available. And then I've also got here the starting cards. This is your typical starting hand, these 10 cards. This is going to be the same between the two games as well. And so if you're not familiar with the gameplay loop, I would suggest watching some of my solo playthroughs, but the general idea is at the beginning of the round, you're going to draw some of these cards, and depending on what icons are on the cards, you can play the card, get some sort of benefit, and then send your worker to one of the places listed on the icon on that card. And then throughout the game, you'll be trying to acquire new cards and get rid of some cards from your starting hand. So you're kind of tailoring the deck as you go. That will give you different effects and abilities, but also change your makeup of icons here that allow you to go to different places. So it is a combo worker placement and deck building game. And we've got our tracks on the right side of the boards here. Those are the victory point tracks. You are playing for victory points. And then in this section of the board, every round will end with combat. So as you're playing, you're gaining troops, which are these cubes, signified by cubes here. And you're putting them in the conflict, and you're getting rewards if you win the conflict each round as well. So number of paths to victory, pretty interesting game. I really like it. But let's start to get into some of the differences between the two versions. So if you are really interested in the Dune IP, if you like the franchise, if you like the story, if you've read all the books, that sort of thing, it's important to know that Dune Imperium, these are both tie-ins with Legendary Pictures. So Dune Imperium came out with the Dune movie, and Dune Imperium Uprising came out with Dune Part 2. So these are tied to the two films, and you're going to notice differences in that regard. So this is going to be more closely the first half of the main Dune story, and this is more closely the second half of the Dune story, but it's going to play the same. And then I should also mention that if you are not really interested in the Dune IP, that's okay too. I've played this game with people who really like the Dune universe and people who don't know anything about it, and both types of people have enjoyed the game. If you really know all the lore and stuff, that might enrich your experience here. But if you think you might be interested in this game, you should really base your decision off the game as it stands on its own and off the merits of the gameplay. So let's start taking a look at some of the main differences here. And I'll move these cards out of the way so we can see a little bit more clearly. If we start with the factions here on the left side, you'll notice that some of the iconography is different. This is just the effects that you get for going to each of these spaces. And then in a couple cases like Highliner here and going from selective breeding to espionage here, the costs have been adjusted a little bit between the two versions as well. So going to the different factions is going to play a little bit differently, but largely it's going to feel the same. Your rewards for getting to the fourth space of each of the factions are going to be the same with the exception of the Emperor, where here we get 2 troops and here we gain a spy. Similarly, the desert spaces have changed a little bit. The cost has changed here. The rewards are significantly different. I'll talk about that a little bit more. The city spaces are pretty similar, but they've been tweaked again. You'll notice that Carthag has gone away, and really the Cell Melange space has been moved down to where Carthag was and is now Spice Refinery. They kind of operate in the same way. Then if we go up to the Landsraad Council, the High Council space works the same, but they added in Uprising a really nice, if you go there more than once, here you can just go there once per game. Here you can go there multiple times, and after the first time you get this other reward, so that's a nice option to have. The base game Dune Imperium has this Mentat space you can go to, grab a Mentat, and that is it's kind of like a temporary extra worker. You're really just delaying your turn. I find this Imperial Privilege space is a little bit better. It lets you recall a previously played worker and draw a card. This lets you draw a card as well, but and then you can also swap your Intrigue cards, so that's pretty nice. The Swordmaster space still exists, but so your Swordmaster is like gaining another worker. Here it always costs 8 Solari. Here it only costs 8 Solari for the first player to go there, and then 6 for each player after that, so that's a slight change. See, Rally Troops has been replaced with Gather Support. They're pretty similar. And then Hall of Oratory has been replaced with Assembly Hall, which I think is slightly better. And then our 2 CHOAM spaces here are pretty different, and that's I guess gonna lead us into one of the first major differences between the games. Dune Imperium Uprising has this CHOAM module, which does not exist in the original base game. And so that's really just these cardboard punch-out tiles here. These are contracts, and there's gonna be 2 on the board. All the time, and whenever you go somewhere where you can gain that symbol, it means take one of these contracts, and that's like a little bonus you can get. So there's a little market of 2 of those, and if you can complete these contracts by going to the spaces that are listed on them, or otherwise completing some sort of requirement, you get a little bonus for it. So that is the CHOAM module in Dune Imperium Uprising. It's nothing really earth-shattering, but it does add just a little variety, a little interest to what you're doing, and another way to gather resources. So it's kind of nice to have. Technically, it's a module you can either incorporate or not incorporate with Dune Imperium Uprising, depending on what you're feeling when you play the game, but I would recommend always using it. Now, the next big change for Dune Imperium Uprising, this is one of the most major ones, is the incorporation of these components here, the Spies, these thin cylinders. These do not exist in Dune Imperium, and these are pieces that you can place on these outposts here, and they kind of watch these spaces. You can see that those things are not on this board, and normally when a worker is in a space, you cannot, pretend they're different colors, you cannot send your worker to a space with another player's worker, which is pretty typical of worker placement games. You're blocking the space. But having a spy that's watching that space allows you to, if one player has their worker there and you're another player color, you can go to that occupied space and take your spy back. The spies can do other things too, but that's the gist of it, and that's a really interesting mechanic. I like that quite a bit. So you'll find that with Dune Imperium Uprising, but not with Dune Imperium. So you can see if you advance enough with the Emperor, you gain a spy there. You can also gain spies from the Bene Gesserit, which is nice and thematic. So it does add a little bit more complexity, but if you play worker placement games and get really frustrated by the blocking, that might be something that would interest you. Now, the last big change in Dune Imperium Uprising, in my mind, is the addition of worms. There's a whole mechanic around that, but it's kind of hard to have a Dune game without worms, but Dune Imperium manages it, and it plays really well without worms, that's fine. But the worms come in this box as both wooden meeples and as minis that you can paint. You can choose to use either or. They are not piece limited, so you can use them both if you really want. And so there's sort of a whole process to be able to get the worms, but by the end game, everybody can kind of get worms usually, and their only purpose is they go into combat and they help you win the combat, and if you have a worm in the combat, it'll double any rewards that you earn. So those worms can be earned here on Deep Desert and Haga Basin, so that's a pretty significant difference between the two boards there, in case you noticed that. I do like that this base game comes with both the wooden meeples and the minis, so that way if you're playing with just the wooden components, you've got it, but if you've gone and you've bought all the upgraded pieces, that upgrade pack is good in full for either one of these base games, and so they give you these minis too, since they are not included in the other minis box. So I think that was a nice thing to add. Now there's a whole other mechanic. I'm not going to go over it here. I've got playthrough videos and rules refreshers that you can go watch if you want to see. But if you're more familiar with Dune Imperium, you can take control of these three spaces here. And there's a whole other mechanic in this game where the worms cannot be used on those spaces as long as the shield wall is here. And the shield wall can be removed. And then once it's removed, it's gone. And now you can use worms for those spaces too. So that's sort of a fun little mini game too. And then this is not quite as big a deal to me. This is maybe on the level of CHOAM as opposed to on the level of the worms or the spies. But the combat cards in Dune Imperium also now have a small set collection component to them. So they've got these icons in the top right corner, and you're trying to match some of them together, and that is another way to earn victory points. So if you're a little bit familiar with Dune Imperium already, the combat cards in Dune Imperium Uprising, again, just have this mini game of set collecting. That just gives the combat cards a little bit more interest. It might make you go in on a combat that you wouldn't otherwise go in on. So very high level, those are the main differences between the two boxes. I've got a few other things that I want to talk about though. First of all is player count. Both of these do support solo play, which is obviously pretty important to me on this channel. The solo mode works largely the same way. It's one of the best solo modes that I've ever come across because it's really simple. You actually play against two opponents and it's just really easy, really streamlined. It doesn't hardly take any time at all. So from that perspective, they're both great. If you're not familiar with it, the high level is there's just this deck of cards and you draw one card from the top of the deck and it tells you where to send the opponent and what sort of reward that they get. That's it. So you just draw one for one opponent, draw one for the next opponent, and then it's back to your turn. Now there is one important improvement, I think, from Dune Imperium to Dune Imperium Uprising in the solo mode, and that is in Dune Imperium, you just use the normal leader cards for your automated rivals. And so some leaders are going to be compatible and some will not because some of the effects kind of involve player choice. And it's like, well, this one leader, you can't use their card, and this other leader, you got to ignore this one part of it. It's not a big deal, but they just made dedicated rival cards in Dune Imperium Uprising, and I think they work better and they're a little bit more interesting. So that's the high level on solo mode. In both games, if you're playing two-player mode, then they still want you to have a third player who's an automated rival. So even a two-player game, you're using one automated opponent. And one small change they made in Dune Imperium Uprising is that there are a couple of automated opponents who you can choose to not win the game. So essentially, you kind of need three people to have enough blocking spaces for this all to work well. If you're playing two people just head-to-head, the board's a little bit too open and you're not really blocking each other that much. So you need somebody else to kind of get in the way. But there are a couple automated opponents in Dune Imperium Uprising that are specifically meant for two-player mode where they get in your way, but they don't actually score any victory points. So that way you don't play a two-player game of Dune Imperium and have the automated opponent beat both of you, because that can be a little bit less satisfying. Now, three-player mode and four-player mode are both supported and both work very similarly between the two games. But then, if this is of interest to you, Dune Imperium Uprising also added a 3 versus 3, so a 6-player mode on the back side of the board. If you want to play that, it comes with some different components. That is not included in Dune Imperium. Now, I have not played the 3 versus 3, so I don't know how well it goes. It sounds super cool to me, but it kind of involves having, 6 people who kind of already know their way around Dune Imperium, and that can be kind of hard to schedule. And if one person drops out, you're left with 5 people, and neither version of the game supports 5 players, so then you're playing something else. But if you think 3 versus 3 is a realistic prospect for you, then Dune Imperium Uprising is going to be the way to go. Again, I said I wouldn't show every card, but there is an important deck of Imperium cards, and that's what you're drawing from. You're purchasing cards to replace your starting hand, and so those are going to be really important. And I just want to point out that the Dune Imperium cards, again, are more related to the first Dune movie. The Dune Imperium Uprising cards are a whole new deck, totally unique from Dune Imperium, but they're going to work exactly the same way, and it's about the same amount of cards. They do mostly similar things, right? There's more cards to support some of the new mechanics like worms and the shield wall and spies and that sort of thing, but largely they're going to use icons in the same way, give you the same sort of basic actions. Now, anecdotally, I've heard it said that the less expensive cards in Dune Imperium Uprising, the cards that cost 1 or 2 or 3 persuasion to acquire, are stronger than the cheap cards from Dune Imperium. Like, they're kind of more worth it to grab them. I don't know if that's really been my experience, but I've heard people say that, so that's maybe something to consider, but you can kind of research that on your own. And then there's also a deck of Intrigue Cards, and that's another type of card where you can kind of play it for a bonus action at different times in the game. And again, those are going to be unique between Dune Imperium and Dune Imperium Uprising as well. But they broadly fall into 3 categories. There's plot cards you can play on your turn, combat cards you play during combat, and endgame cards you play at the end of the game to get some bonus points. And so I counted them all out, and I just thought it was interesting. The ratio shifted a little bit, but in base game Dune Imperium, there's 26 plot cards, whereas in Uprising, there's 24, including 1 that works with the CHOAM module specifically. In Dune Imperium, there's 11 combat cards. There are only 10 in Uprising, including, again, 1 for CHOAM. There are 2 endgame cards in Dune Imperium and 3 in Uprising, again, including 1 for CHOAM. And then in Dune Imperium, there is a single card that can be used either in combat or during the endgame. In Uprising, there are 4 cards that can be used either as plot cards or during combat, and that includes 1 CHOAM card. And there are 3 more cards that can be used as either plot cards or endgame cards. So that's a lot of numbers, but that's to say there was only 1 card that I saw in the Dune Imperium deck that can be used in 2 different ways, and there were 7 of them in Uprising. So I think that's a neat mechanic that they lean on a little bit more here. Now let me move some of this stuff to the side. Again, some of you may be really into the Dune franchise, into the intellectual property. So you might be interested in the playable characters. So let me lay those out real quick. Let's see if they all fit here, just so you can kind of see who they are. And if you have some idea of how to play the game, you can see what they do. By and large, you can take the characters from base game Dune Imperium and play them in Uprising. Really, this one's going to be maybe a little bit weaker because that's kind of like a spy sort of ability. So if you play this character on this board, it'll play a little bit different. But again, that can kind of free up your spies to go other places. So I don't think it's not usable. And here are the playable leaders for Dune Imperium Uprising. So you're going to see some familiar faces, some new faces, and we've got 1 more leader in total. So this leader here can only be used when playing with the CHOAM module, which again, I would always use. So that gives you some idea of what you can expect in each box. So I will start by saying that if I was only going to have 1 base game and 1 base game alone, it would be Dune Imperium Uprising. It's a little bit heavier, not a lot, but slightly, and so I kind of enjoy that. I like the spies and the worms and collecting the different combat cards and the CHOAM module. All that stuff is great. I like it. So I kind of prefer this version by itself. However, there are expansions out there, so let me talk about some of the expansions too. One of them is Rise of Ix. That was the first one to be released, I believe, and that adds several modules. I've got videos on that as well, but namely Technology Module and Dreadnoughts. Oh, and the shipping track as well. So a few big things. If you think you're going to play Rise of Ix a lot and you really like Rise of Ix, I would suggest get Dune Imperium, the base game, with Rise of Ix. I think they integrate better. I think the Dreadnoughts are super interesting, but they kind of have some overlap with what the worms do. They are different. They're not quite the same. But I don't know if you want both Dreadnoughts and the worms at the same time. So if you're going to play just Rise of Ix, I would recommend go Dune Imperium. Now the next expansion is Immortality, and I think generally this one gets the lowest reviews, but I think it's really cool. It has, I think, my favorite mechanic of all the expansions, which is grafting. That is super fun. I wish there was more grafting. And Immortality, if you just want to play that one, frankly, it goes along, it plays well with both of these base games. So it'll be a little bit thinkier experience if you go with Uprising, but it's going to play well with both of these. So if you just want to play Immortality, you can really get each game and or either game, and you can kind of decide, do you want the spies and the worms or not? Then we can start to combo things. So if you think you want to play with Rise of Ix and Immortality, which I've done a playthrough like that on this channel as well. You can go find it, as well as the other ones individually. If you want to put them both together, and that's the way you think you want to play all the time, again, I would go with the base game Dune Imperium, because I think that Ix plus Immortality, you're starting to get a couple different sideboards going on there, and there's enough moving parts that I don't know that you also need Spies and Worms. I don't know that I would want to play Uprising with Ix and Immortality. You can play with either or. Again, if I was going to play just Ix, though, I think I'd prefer to play over here. And then the last expansion to date is Bloodlines. And Bloodlines was the last one released. It was the only one released after Uprising came out. So the compatibility is sort of mixed. It'll work with everything in Uprising, and it'll work with most things in Imperium. And so if you're going to play with just the Bloodlines expansion, my preference is to play that with Uprising, just because everything kind of works together. The Bloodlines expansion adds a couple main modules. It adds Sardaukar commanders, and that kind of works equally well with either of the base games, but then it also adds a technology board again. So it kind of takes part of Rise of Ix and repackages it in a different way. So I like to play it with Uprising because it kind of takes the parts of Ix that I really like. Well, I guess I liked all of Ix, but because there's worms in this, I don't really need the dreadnoughts, and so I get to bring the techs over without having to worry about dreadnoughts and worms. So let me run through all that one more time. If you want to play the base game by itself, for me, I would take Uprising, but either is a valid option. They both play really well. I just think that Uprising is slightly thinkier. It's got a couple other mechanics going on. If you want to play with just the Rise of Ix expansion, I would go Dune Imperium. If you want to play with just the Bloodlines expansion, I would go with Dune Imperium Uprising, though Dune Imperium is still a valid option. If you want to get just Bloodlines, that's fine. The Immortality expansion plays pretty well with both of these. I wouldn't be worried about it either way. And then if you're going to start combining expansions together, I think once you've got 2 or more expansions, I'm going to lean more towards Dune Imperium base game. There are really great directions in all of the rule books on how to integrate all this stuff, but when you're setting it up, I don't know if you want to be cross-referencing all these different books, and well, if you want to use this module plus this module, then you need to take out this card, and you that sort of thing. If you don't want to deal with that, then maybe don't play with them all at once. And so as a solo player, I think the 2 ways that I enjoy playing most, and I realize this is not super helpful, but I like to play base game Dune Imperium with Rise of Ix and Immortality, or I like to play Dune Imperium Uprising with Bloodlines. So that's just my opinion. You might have a different opinion. That's totally fine. But those are my thoughts on Dune Imperium versus Dune Imperium Uprising and how they play with the expansions to date. But I would love to know your opinion as well. So let me know in the comments. If you think there's anything crucial that I missed, please add it down there so other people can see it. Or if you have any questions about either of these games, I'd be happy to answer some questions for you as well. And again, I've got lots of playthrough videos. I've got playthrough videos currently up of just the base game of each, so you can go compare those. And then I've got a playthrough video of original DI with Rise of Ix, of original Dune Imperium with Immortality, and original Dune Imperium with both Ix and Immortality. And in a few weeks, I'll have a video up of Uprising plus Bloodlines. So I do hope that was helpful, at least until Legendary releases a 3rd Dune movie and then a 3rd game comes out, and then this whole thing is going to fall apart. But whenever that happens, I'll be here. So if this was useful, please leave a like on the video, consider subscribing so you don't miss any future Dune Imperium content, and share the video with somebody else who might find it helpful. But that's what I've got this time on Table for One. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.